All right, we're back with the build of Tim Zimmer's English longbow. We were showing the chamfering, creeping in stage of that. We're gonna, we've brought it in, a lot more now. It's probably down to about 7/8 on the end here and about 1 3/8 at the handle, approximately. And so now I'm gonna use a lot of these two tools right here. The Big Farrier's horseshoe rasp and this number 50 Nicholson. So we're going to go back and forth between those two and bring this taper in a little bit more. Then I'm going to stop from that. After bringing in a little bit more, I'm going to actually start working in the belly itself. So first things first, we're just going to work down the stave, bringing it in, following that taper as much as possible. I'm just working it, as much as you can see here. I don't know how well you can see some of this. I'll pull my punch up here a little bit more so you can see more of that. But initially, what's happening here is I'm just working down from the handle region, following that taper. This thing removes a lot of material on that front strike. It looks like I'm pulling it back and forth at the same time, but actually I'm going pushing forward, lifting up like that. I'm just moving very quickly and close to it. This is removing a lot. There's a point where you have to stop using this rasp, otherwise you'll dig in too deep, take too much out, and you got these big tool marks inside your finished stave stick that you can't get out. So you can really be careful on how far you go with this. A lot of it comes down to scraping with the blades. Sighting down, kind of keeping a feel for your handle there, what's going on there. In fact, it'll kind of become a priority for a little bit, so you can scale it down. I usually just go mostly by the feel, but for the camera's sake, a lot of times I'll take the measuring tape here and go where it's showing approximately 1 1/4 inches by, and that's a little bit tall yet, by 1 1/2 inches. It's a bit tall. We'll bring that down. And that 1 1/4 inches is sort of nominal because a little bit removed here, a bit more than you would expect. But believe me, from experience and knowing, it's adequate. So now I'm just going to work mostly alongside of that. And we're going to be marking this belly here a little bit. Of course, being careful in this region. Just mostly cleaning up and getting it where it's a little more refined, more manageable. I'm not going to go too deep with this big rasp. It's going to come to a point where I back off with it and only use it as necessary and hard to remove spots. And this is the time where I'm really having to get very engaged manually, closer to the stock. The bandsaw. You can do it to a certain point, but then you start losing sight and certain types of control. You have to be careful with that. So I'm going to be working handle and riser, kind of get that happening there so I can keep that taper. Right now at this stage of the game, getting this taper getting it in the right direction, and where your belly, this is something else I'm going to cover quickly here, is this belly is now even more important than what's happening on the back. The back speaks for itself. You have your taper drawn in there, your layout. It is what it is, and hopefully everything, it looks like it's all stable. Now the belly, this is the most critical point, and I always bring this up. A lot of guys will have this get hung up on the relationship, the front and the belly and the back of the bow. When you pull this bow, the back follows the belly. And the only time it changes that is on the return energy and the thrust, but that's already spoken for in one uniform pull and throw. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you want an excessively twisted back on that, obviously, but what happens on the belly is the compression is extremely important, and it becomes the priority in terms of actually bending. Yes, you want the back of the bow to have no violations as much as possible, if at all, anywhere on there. And yes, you want your flank taper to be as uniform as possible. But if it's going to have some rolls. It's going to actually wave and do. Very rare do you have sometimes you get lucky and have a completely flat, even, smooth U stick. But for the most part, if you want character and you want rolling, you're going to have a lot of rolling going on. I've seen guys actually get stuck with a bow that looks like a propeller because they were thinking that they had to follow that back that way. Well, at times you have to accommodate that, but for the most part, 99% of it, you want the belly to be its own entity, in control of itself, its own line, so that back will follow the compression. And if you have two different bellies, you have war. You can't do that. So now the focus becomes in everything that you're doing here, creating one straight, even belly all the way down. It has to become part of your mentality when you're building the bow. You can't forget that. It has to be what you are doing. The goal you are after is to create that one. You know, it's one thing for me to say that, but you have to actually do it. You have to actually understand that's what you're doing, is creating one continuous belly line all the way down. So it's kind of like part of a mentality in the bow making, is sighting that in. So I'm going to continue forming this, and I'm going to create a baseline, a base where everything is uniform. Then we're going to come back and skim off some of that with a bandsaw or knife, whichever one happens to work the best at the moment. In reality, we're not that far off from floor tiller. That is the direction we're trying to move right now. That's the path in which we're trying to go. And keep this taper getting sharper and sharper, more and more accurate, refined. I'm going to continue bringing this to the point it needs to be off cam, and then we will clean it up a little. I'm going to smooth these out a little bit so I can make a sensible line on it, on the belly region, and I'll show you that next. It'll be a skim off, but we're going to be very careful. I'm going to have the handle region very well spoken for as far as how I want to keep that mass in that area. Be back soon. Okay, I have scaled this thing way down. I've actually created a grip region that feels fairly reasonable. It's a bit tall yet. The D cross section is coming in. It's heavy, very heavy yet, but we're going to change that, because the next phase of this is going to be skimming down that belly, just kind of taking off some of that crown and even some of the edges, reducing the bulk that doesn't need to be there. But we need guidelines to do that. And this is, once again, this is the only time you're going to see me. Definitely not on sapwood. And of course, anywhere we're getting close to being finished, you can sand some of this out of the belly region, but I don't recommend a marker in an area that is going to be displayed or, you know, seen by the eye. So I'm just going to go down right along the very edge here, right where this kind of roll is beginning. It's not going. We're not going to take off a huge amount. We're just going to get rid of this surface uniformly all the way down. And this is one of the handy things about the bandsaw, is you can skim this quickly. Now I can do this with a rasp, and I just might on one end, or probably wind up doing. I wind up using all the tools. I don't just get hung up on one thing. The bandsaw is a helpful tool for kicking things along and saving my elbow a lot of excessive rasping. But you have to be very careful with the bandsaw. It's its own thing. It's its own art in terms of understanding what you're taking off and how you're doing it. That blade can move and do weird stuff, and really, I've discovered, I've learned over time where to stop using the bandsaw and what staves it's not working for me on. But one thing the bandsaw can do for you is create uniformity in some of your removal, and also get around knots, which I can do with a knife and a rasp. Yes, there's ways of crowning and removing. But remember, I'm not making one English longbow. I make 3 to 6 of these in a month, along with other bows. I'm not doing high production, but there's some steps, because it all comes down to approximately 90% hand tools. But whatever I can do to reduce the amount of time and even potential problems that can happen by jerking through with a knife and doing a peel up and a pop out. Yes, it comes down to skill, but it also comes down to incidences that you may not be aware of. I don't care how good you are or how you fluff your ego up on it, because your best boyers screw shit up all the time. Anyway. And just because nature kicks us when we least expect it. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to once again don my desk mask. I shall return in a few seconds here to begin skimming down, showing that part of the process. Okay, let's see if I can get this in the right position here. Yeah. I know you can't see a whole lot from there. My cameraman could always help me out with that, but this is what I got now. Going to skim right down, and I may go at an angle first. So what happens from here is I'm going to repeat what I did a little bit ago. It's been scaled down, and I'm going to just take the rasp and just the big rasp, because I can still get away with it at this point because we're just getting close to getting our taper more, you know. I'm just going to clean up just what I just did. Recreate our decross section because there's enough material to do that. There's a point where I'm going to stop using the bandsaw in this area. I'll skim it with a knife, lock plane, scraper. I don't want to lose this taper now. And judging how much material that you need for your decross section, it's kind of a skill. It's something that you acquire over time. That's one of the advantages of hand tools at first, is that you become acquainted with that. You consider it my first 250 or more yew bows, all with hand tools. Had a bit more than that. So here I am recreating and blending it, getting this handle association going on here. It wasn't quite a bit bigger off the riser a little bit ago. Okay. These are really long, stringy shavings. I don't breathe them in. In fact, I've never breathed one of these in. So, yeah, you could say it's ideal to wear a mask, and this one probably should. But when that bandsaw kicks up the dust, or sanders, it's a different story. Entire different weight of dust you do breathe in. Okay, I'm going to continue what you saw me doing here till we are starting a light floor tiller. So we'll be back then.